Welcome back to Case Studies. This has been a long time overdue. I have asked you for probably 6 months to be on this podcast, but what's unique about you is that we actually have a ton of Utah entrepreneurs that have personally requested you. People in Salt Lake, people in Utah County that have said, I would love to hear Brad's story. And so why that was fun for me is like, it's a story that I don't think most people know. You know what I mean? Like it's actually like a beautiful Utah, massive outcome, almost go bankrupt story.
Yeah.
That no one knows. You know what I mean? So I'm so excited to dig into that, but then also kind of the personal, just life and kind of just dig into you. And so anyway, I want to tell you thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad I could hold out until that appearance fee, got a little higher.
It's the way you roll, It's NIL money.
That's exactly right.
So talk to me about like Brad 1.0. Like when you were growing up and somebody said, "Hey, what are you going to be when you grow up?" What was that answer?
So I had a distinctly unfair advantage as a kid. One, I had a mother and father who were extraordinarily hardworking, who were college graduates. If you just look statistically, like I had the cards were stacked in my favor, right? My dad was a serial entrepreneur. And so I think a lot of kids grow up in this environment where they're taught, hey, you need to go to school, you need to go get a job. Try to get the best paying job you can or do something you love or a combination kind of those two. My dad never worked for anyone else his entire life.
Whoa.
And so our conversations weren't about what job are you going to go get. It's like, what business are you going to go start?
From day one.
From day one, dude. So like you ask me like, what do you want to do? And it's like, well, I want to run my own business. Like I want to start something. And so I would work in my dad's businesses each summer, as a teenager. My buddy Matt, who I started Walker Edison with, he worked for my dad. Like, he employed a whole bunch of people in the neighborhood. And my dad went kind of boom and bust.
And talk to me about like examples, because I know that story. And your dad was kind of like boom bust, blow it up, build it again, kind of zero fear of like ever creating something. He just knew he could go create always.
And I would say his track record is probably like a 70% success, 30% failure.
Yeah.
Like in the businesses that he helped start.
Yep.
What I think my dad was really good at was identifying talent around him. And that's something that I've tried to emulate in my own business.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you are only as good as the people that you're able to attract to your team. And so I think my dad, when he backed me and my buddy Matt to start Walker Edison, I think he recognized something in us. I mean, he was probably biased too, right? Like, oh, this is my son. This is, my adopted son, basically. But he was really good at identifying that.
Because Matt was like one of your best buddies from like early on.
When we moved from California to the mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon, I moved like 5 houses down from Matt. And so we were in the same ward and neighborhood. We played, similar sports. It was like a brother to me. So
isn't that fun how like when you look back and even kind of when you're saying like, I was just lucky, parents with degrees, your co-founder, you think about like the wild storms that you guys navigated, that relationship had those roots, from a young age. I think about some of my friends that I do business with that I've known for a long time. There's nothing that shakes us. There's stuff that shakes the business, but there's nothing that shakes us. So I'm just like, I've been through way worse with you. You know what I mean? And that's gotta be like such a blessing as you're going through it.
It's specifically with a business partner like Matt, like we always knew where each other stood. Like there was no questioning motives.
And you guys are way different, right?
Oh, like he's the yin to my yang, bro. Yeah. Like I am full throttle all the time. And he's like, well, hey, Brad, did you think about it this way? And can we afford this and whatever? I'm like, afford budget? What? And it was kind of that relationship. And it was beautiful. Like we had one disagreement in 16 years of running the business together.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Like it's insane. So you grow up, you're looking at different businesses. Your dad kind of full range of different businesses. What type of businesses did he build?
So I was born here in Provo. I was the only one of my siblings that was born here in Utah. My mom's from the Bay Area, so we moved out there after my dad graduated from BYU. I was like 3 months old or something like that. We moved back to the Bay Area. That's where my mom's whole family is from. That's where the roots are. And he started selling computer parts out of his apartment, like keyboard. I actually am not quite sure. He started a chain of computer stores though in his like early to mid 20s called Data Source Computers. And by the time he was like 26, remember this is like late 80s. He was doing 40 million bucks a year in revenue as a 26-year-old. Like now, I'm not sure what the equation would be. Probably a couple $100 million kind of retail chain. And he kind of, like many of us entrepreneurs, he kind of lucked into it. He was just like,
I'm kind of like a historian of business. Like I love studying founders. And there's this podcast right now called Acquired. I don't know if
I've heard of
looked at it, but these guys just did Microsoft.
Okay.
And they're going through that story of Microsoft and I also kind of read Michael Dell's biography recently.
Yeah.
And what you're describing, there was just this time where those tailwinds, Bay Area, East Coast, computers, not like a mainframe for a business, but like the personalized computer. It was just a rising tide that raised a lot of boats.
It was, I actually look at my own business. If you had to start an e-com business selling products on the internet, you could not have even picked a better month than when we started Walker Edison. Yeah. Like in the history of time, knowing everything we know now.
Insane.
Like it's why it was almost like
your mind.
Yeah, it was like meant to be. This was and so my dad's out there in the Bay Area. He's mid 20s. I love my homies that are in their mid 20s. You don't know as much as when you're 40 and you've been through warfare and you have the scar tissue and stuff. And so they wound up, I think, kind of turning the keys over at a certain point. And he didn't make any real money from it. He just gained a lot of life experience. Okay. So that's when we moved back. I think I was like 13, moved back here. My dad picks up a C++, like how to program book. And he's working for his brother at one of my grandpa's old business, and he teaches himself how to program, like literally at nights, right? He's teaching himself how to write in C++, and he programs this time and attendance software. So you used to have to like punch in and out, and there were no electronic options, when you're clocking into your job. And so he created one of the very first digital timekeeping softwares. And so that company is called QQuest. It's still in existence today in the Jordan Commons building in San Diego. Yeah. It's just kind of wild. I think he sold really early in that cycle because he was like, okay, I got no money. Like this business is done fairly well. Yeah. Let's take some chips off the table. But it's been a great business.
Killing it.
For 30 years.
But he just kept going. It was kind of that type of stuff. And even like, and we can get to Walker Edison later.
Yeah.
But he was kind of, he was like your partner in that thing.
He legitimately, he's kind of a problem solver, but one kind of special gift I think my dad has that I've tried to take from him, staying hyper focused on what you're really good at. And this is me now as an investor, like with my investor hat on. There's too many businesses that try to do too many things for too many people, and that's when I see businesses become kind of spread too thin. Like then you become good at nothing. And so staying hyper focused on your space, your niche, becoming the very best, delivering that customer experience that has gotten you to where you are is hyper important.
Yep. No, so that makes sense. So you grow up in Salt Lake, go to the University of Utah. Athlete, you were always really good at sports.
I love sports. I don't know that I was ever really good at them. I kind of I played a lot of sports. I grew up playing baseball.
But you're obviously like super, like we play golf. I've never taken money ever from you in golf ever. Like I think the reason you like playing with me so much is it's just easy money. Look, like it's just like, how many strokes do you want? Sweet, you can have them. I know I'm going to take your money.
I give you a stroke a hole last time we played,
could
bro.
Be more, but I've never won money from you. But I think about, great hand-eye coordination, mentally tough. And I think a lot of those things, you were obviously like, you were, good enough to go play at a high level.
Yeah, I played a bunch of sports. So I went on an LDS mission to Argentina, Rosario. It was like a beautiful, up to that point in my life, it was the hardest thing that I had ever done. And I leave on my mission. I'd played sports kind of through high school and stuff like that. I'm 210 pounds, 6'3". Like I'm a kind of a big musty kid, you know? And, I get down to 145 pounds. All of this weight just kind of leaves my body. I lose all feeling in my big toes, like my legs. I can't pick up my feet anymore. I'm like, maybe this is just what happens on an LDS mission, you know, like you get sick from something and all this stuff happens. I get home and I go to the doctor and he's like, oh, you've got a problem. And so I was diagnosed with Charcot-Marie tooth, which is muscular dystrophy, and it's hereditary and it comes on in your late teen years. And so I didn't know that was kind of part of my life plan. But yeah, I have like 10% leg strength. I can't feel the tips of my fingers anymore. It's kind of like a cousin to ALS. It's kind
of eating you alive and you didn't even know it.
Didn't even know it. Like I just knew that I had a harder time walking, like as the mission went along, because you're walking 15, 20 miles a day, right? And so I just knew that I had a harder time walking than like my companions. And it turns out that's what it was.
Wow. And so what do you do with that? Like when you get like that news?
It was really progressive for a few years, but then it kind of plateaus. And then over time, it just kind of generally declines. So your ability, you know, like I should be working out more, but losing weight for me, like I've lost 50 pounds over the last year, has been a blessing because my ankles, my knees, stuff like that.
Takes all the weight off of it.
Take some weight off and you
look
do
fantastic,
a lot better.
by the way.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate you.
You really do.
Yeah, thanks.
So you come home off your mission. Kind of sports isn't going to be
my thing.
And I think all of us, like when you're a little kid, you're like, I'm going to go be Derek Jeter. I'm going to go be Tom Brady. And
I'm a huge San Francisco Giants fan, man. I was looking at like Will Clark, Barry Bonds, these legends.
That's going to be me. And then you kind of, all of us come to a point, some of us sooner than others, where you're like, that's not going to be me.
I'm not that good.
But so like, and you go to the University of Utah.
Yeah. First I went to BYU.
Okay. Went to BYU. And that just wasn't the right fit.
So if you're talking about product market fit, I was the wrong product for BYU.
Yeah.
So look, BYU, I would love it if my kids went to BYU. I think it's a great school. I still speak there all the time. A lot of energy. Their entrepreneurship program is fantastic. Our friend Jeff Bonham continues to teach there and has me down every single semester.
Yep.
Sometimes it's just not the right fit, you know? And so for me, I needed just a little bit more diversity than kind of what BYU had provided. Yep. And so I tested out of Spanish. I got all those credits. I did like a year worth of schooling in, one semester type of thing. So transferred up to the University of Utah. I was working at a bank, and then I worked at Coldwell Banker Commercial for a guy named Brandon Fugel.
Oh, yeah.
And so I did that for like a year and a half as I was going through school. School for me was nails on a chalkboard.
It just you never liked it.
Oh, I did. It was, if you've ever had a job where you dread waking up in the morning and going to that job, that was traditional college for me. Like the electives, the stuff that I literally didn't care about, it felt like a colossal waste of time for me.
You couldn't see the benefit.
I legitimately couldn't. And the network wasn't like, I mean, it's undergrad, right? Like it's not, like you and I have since gone back, and like I just graduated from Harvard Business School, and it was this phenomenal experience. And for whatever reason, man, undergrad it was just not my thing. I was interested in the hustle. At all times, I was buying and selling stuff, and I would scour local classifieds. I learned a whole bunch about a bunch of different product verticals, and I would keep these detailed spreadsheets as a college student about what asking prices were, what I was able to acquire a product for, where I sold it through, part number, model number, age, miles, whatever. It didn't matter. I kept all this data. And this actually, in hindsight, I think kind of informed what I wound up doing with Walker Edison, right? But I knew before I even bought a product whether I was going to be successful with that product, because I had so much data. It's like, look, I've purchased this same product 100 times, and 100 times I've had these outcomes over here.
You just had that confidence.
It's like a virtual guarantee, And so, so I was constantly flipping stuff through college.
But was that just natural? Was that just like you've always been called to like or curious about like, hey, why does something cost the way it costs? And can I get a good deal? Or like, what should something sell at? And is there a way to, cause you're a marketing, like there's people in my life that I think they have, exceptional skill sets, top one. And I think you have a top 1% marketing skill set, storytelling skill set. It's something that's like really great for you. But when you couple that with the ability to buy right, that's all of a sudden where like there's a margin. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's an opportunity to like really capture value.
It's a bit of the problem with what I was doing now, again, in hindsight, there was no stable supply chain. Like I was only as good as the next product that somebody would list for sale on KSL Classifieds or wherever I was buying from, Craigslist. But yeah, it was a bit of I had superior knowledge than everyone else. And so I used that knowledge for my benefit to make my margin on these products, and I found, the right sales channel to sell this stuff through. And it was just, it was one of those experiences where it was like, oh, cool, I can make money at this. I can make money at this. I was making more flipping Rolexes than I was at my job, So
that's got to be one of the reasons why that job was so painful. Because you're like, I'm wasting my time. I'm like, if I spent this time doing this other thing, I could make 10 times as much money. I'm giving my best time to something that's capped on the upside. Was that kind of the feeling?
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing about my job, specifically when I was a loan officer at the bank, I would work, I'm not kidding, in an 8-hour shift, I would work for 1 hour because you just sit there and you kind of wait for loan applications to come in, or you wait for a person to walk through the door. So those 7 hours
were really productive.
Oh my gosh, dude, I was making so much money. And it wasn't the job, right? The job just kind of provided a stable base. I had some benefits. I had some stuff like that, but they didn't expect anything out of me. And to this day, I walk into a bank and half the people were just sitting there talking to each other. I'm like, man, if I ran my business this way,
it would not be good.
Yes. Yeah.
No, I'll go in to meet with a banker at Chase or something like that. And we got 5 people sitting in desk and they're getting on the phone. And it's just there's just not a lot of productivity, happen in a lot of those places. And there's no incentive to be more productive.
There's not.
It's not hey, you go, stack twice as many, make twice as much. It's kind of you got to go, put in the day's work.
I got the exact same paycheck, whether I did 10 loans in a day or 0 loans in a day, and so there's an extreme misalignment in some industries towards incentivizing employees. That's just one of those industries.
Yeah. So you're going through that, you're doing your side hustle. When did Walker Edison enter the picture?
So coming back to my dad, he had exited his software business. He had a nice outcome. It wasn't a huge outcome, but it was a nice outcome. And he started Coldwell Banker Mergers and Acquisitions. And that's kind of when I was working, with Brandon and some other people there. And he started Coldwell Banker Mergers and Acquisitions, and they were focused on businesses. They're essentially investment bankers, but in a small cap kind of space. And he saw a business called Gift in a Balloon that came across his desk, and they were doing $1.5 million a year, but they were making $500,000. And he's like, hey, Brad, I know you want to start something. This could be a good opportunity. If I invested, do you want to run this? And again, when I talk about having the cards stacked in your favor, I want to give my kids every opportunity to win. And my parents did that for me. Now, they never gave me money. That was different. They taught me how to work hard, and my dad was our very first funder. And those two things alone were, kind of game changers for me. So we start, I get in there. There was a bunch of stuff that was not disclosed by the seller. Walmart, the very first day I was in there, Walmart was their only customer. Their buyer called and said, we're shutting you off. We're not going to buy anymore, because this gentleman had invoiced for a whole bunch of product that he had never shipped. And so it was fraud, right? And so we had a seller note. We just got rid of the seller note, and my dad helped me kind of navigate those waters. Fast forward a year or two, that was actually, I only had 4 employees, but it was a really intense business to run, even though it was very profitable. And I found a piece of furniture at a trade show, brought it in, drove it to overstock.com. And that day was the day that kind of Walker Edison was born. Like Overstock, taught us how the power of the internet and the power of e-commerce, and you're selling 24 hours a day.
You know what's scary to me? And it's scary and it's also exciting is what if like balloon in a bottle or like gift in a bottle would have worked?
Gift in a balloon?
Yeah, gift in a balloon.
Yeah.
Like what if it would have worked? What if it would have gone like kind of nice and you did $2.5 million a rev and Walker Edison doesn't exist. You know what I mean? It's kind of one of those where it's like, that fraud and that failure and that probably pain of like working and the stress was actually what had to happen
to get
there. You know, that it always, it's so fascinating.
I think the thing, and again, I kind of look back on each one of these stages. You talked about Brad 1.0. This is probably Brad 2.0. Like we're into Brad 2.0 now. I was selling these things for like a couple bucks a pop, right? Like, so you'd sell the machine. This machine was like $1,000. You'd sell it to a Walmart store. And then the idea was you'd sell all the supplies to kind of service the machine.
Yep.
But when you're only selling a balloon with some paper shred and a bow for $2, you have to sell a lot of those. And so my number one goal was to find something with an average sale price substantially higher than where gift.
You don't have to sell as much.
Exactly. Yeah. I wanted to sell less, but make more. And so, you know, when I came across this piece of furniture that I just purchased at Best Buy for $250, the factory was like, oh, that's $22. And I'm like, dude, like $228 in margin somewhere in the value chain on that piece of furniture. That's a lot of margin. You can make a lot of mistakes if you have a lot of margin.
Big margin.
Yes. Yep.
I mean, that I went to this Tony Robbins business mastery event. And he's, you know, the language was, I actually kept used on the podcast, but like the message, he basically said, if you don't have 20% margins, you're effed.
Yeah.
And I think about that. It's actually like, it always comes back to that. He said like a big margin allows you to make a lot of mistakes and a tight margin business, you just kind of have to be better.
Yes.
And a lot of things have to fall in your favor for you to have that business. And so for you having that big margin probably cured a multitude of sins, you know.
You can cover up a lot of bad business, you know, management decisions, whatever, if your margin is rich.
Yeah.
Now you'd rather run a really good business with high margins, right? But like there were a lot of times in Walker Edison's history where legitimately we made a very bad choice.
Yeah.
You know, and because the business was so profitable from day one, it allowed us to continue on.
I was with Todd Peterson 2 days ago, and we're talking about, you know, some of the misses and the like air balls. And we did this retail initiative with Best Buy. And
I remember that.
Literally, it's like take money in the backyard and just burn it. Like it was like, and I think it was like in the tune of like $100 million. You know, we had a couple of these different initiatives. But again, going back to when you have a really great business with really big margins, it's like the sands of time. Time kind of moves. You forget about that, and you just like move on. You move on to the next thing, and you get to live to fight another day. I think about one other lesson. You know, Alex Dunn. It was kind of a tough time in my career. And I went and I sat down with him, and he's giving me some advice. And he said, you just have to stay in the game.
Yeah.
Like just stay in the game.
Too many people pull out. Yep.
And there's one thing about like choosing to pull out, but sometimes the game kicks you out.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
And that's that big margin is it allows you to stay in the game. Yep. It allows you to keep playing in the game and try new decisions, new initiatives, new strategy or whatever by being in it. So it's fascinating that was like that lesson of gift in a balloon of tight margin, high volume was like I don't want this business in the future. I want the opposite of this business.
Yes.
Yeah.
High margin. And now we did wind up doing a big volume, but like, you know, margins matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you get started with Walker Edison. It's not Walker Edison. It's, you know, buy a piece of furniture and sell it on overstock. When did you like start realizing, hey, this has substance or this could have legs?
So in the very first year, now we didn't know. It's not like we sat down, came up with a business plan, looked at the total addressable market, hired a bunch of consultants to tell us where we need to go. This was nascent. This was like early days of the internet. E-commerce adoption had just begun, really. And we're talking 2006, right? It's tough to ship a piece of furniture like through FedEx and UPS.
Yeah.
So like they're big, they're bulky. I mean, these chairs, right? Like how do you ship that through FedEx and UPS?
I don't know.
I can tell you exactly how to do it because I've done it a few thousand times now, right? Like with individual products.
Yeah.
The demand was so large for home furnishings on the internet that basically every channel partner that we went to go talk to, Walmart, Target, Costco, Overstock, like you name the company, they had an unfulfilled appetite for this product. And they were like, yes, awesome. You guys know how to drop ship? Cool. And they were just sending us vendor paperwork. So now if you were to go try to recreate this business, like I have all the contacts, but if you who don't have any contacts in this space and have never done this before, that you will never even get a call back from Walmart, right? Like they have all the vendors they need, you know, and you would kind of just be a pain to them. Like, oh, we have to get this new vendor set up. There's so much learning that happens over time with your relationship with some of these retailers.
And you getting into the infrastructure, getting into the plumbing, like you're just a part of their organization. Like it's easy.
Yeah. We were the easy button. In fact, we talked about that a lot. Like, how do we align our organization to be the very best vendor that Walmart has ever had, or Overstock has ever had, or Wayfair.com has ever had? Like, we want to be number one. And so when you talk to a buyer, you know, at Wayfair, who is your favorite channel partner to work with? I want them to say Walker Edison, because we're going to make it so easy for you to do business with us, and we are going to sell the lights out of this product. You take all the praise.
That's such a fascinating idea or principle. Like you think of like if you're a basketball coach and somebody's scoring points, what do? Like you feed them the rock.
Oh, the whole time. You got the hot hand, dude.
And it's the same with this. You're like, if you're like the easy one, that there's no pain there, there's no friction, and customers like it and we like it. It's like, feed them the rock. Like, let's buy more from them because they're, you know, this is like way better than pulling teeth with somebody else, or you know what I mean?
Getting a new vendor set up for these guys is a colossal pain. Like they don't know anything. They don't know retail link. They don't know, like, so they'd rather just feed us business, right? Like we're doing, you know, 7, 8, 9 figures with these guys. Like, you know, they're like, hey, we'll just do more with Walker Edison because we know that they know what they're doing.
There's 2 more interesting like sports analogies that pop up when you're kind of talking about that kind of business principle. I read the book of Cal Ripken Jr. And he's talking about early in his career when he's kind of the star.
Yeah.
And he just said, I knew that the day was going to come where I was in a hitting slump or I was getting older or whatever. And I want to create so much value for that organization that I was the last person that they could cut.
Yes.
And that was his whole mentality was, I'm going to go take extra ground balls. I'm going to go work with the young rookies. I'm going to go do the things that the kind of big star wouldn't do selfishly.
Yep.
Because I know you're not always in the sun. And when that happens, I want everybody to have to think super, super hard about not having me here. And that kind of what you're talking about with those vendors is there's booms and busts, and there's times where it's flowing, it's times it's not. And just being their favorite that allows them to cut somebody else.
Yes. Yes. There's, you know, the quantitative, there's the qualitative, there's full blown intangibles that you can't put a number on or even, you know, try to quantify. But it's do these people love doing business with us, you know?
Was that just something you and your business partner always shared? You always shared that same philosophy on kind of service and value?
Yeah, I think it happened over time, but it was kind of like the theory you just described. It's like, hey, if they're ever going to let, you know, some channel partners go, like we don't want to be in that group of people. Like we want to make this so easy for them to do business with us. So like we want them to love us, you know, and it's, by the way, that's a culture building exercise. Like that has to filter from me as the CEO through the entire organization. It's like
that's customer service, shipping. That's 1,000 little things. Yeah, for sure. When I was talking to Taysom about playing with Drew Brees, he said that Drew would show up early. He would take every rep and he'd leave late.
Yes.
And his mentality was, 1, I'm going to work harder than anybody else. But 2, I'm not going to let this new rookie show up and go light up the practice field.
Yeah.
I'm taking every rep, just like I am, you
set the tone, right?
And he goes and has like a long career, probably longer than, almost anybody, a Hall of Fame guy.
Yep.
But what you're describing is just that. It's like, we got to be better at everything. Like set the tone as the CEO, but then down into every that philosophy or that like culture of excellence.
Yes.
And the difference between premium, like we can go to the sell of the company, but like you get bought on a premium because of excellence.
They pay you more if your business is differentiated because you are better than everyone else.
And a lot of it's soft stuff.
Oh yeah.
Hard stuff matters, hard numbers matter a lot.
Yep.
But the soft stuff matters a lot.
I think the soft stuff really allows you to scale too. It's like, hey, we know these guys are a leader in the space. Why are they a leader? Like me as the CEO, I was always worried about who's the next Walker Edison. Who else has this maniacal focus on excellence?
Yeah.
Where are they coming from? How do we guard against that? Like, let's, never rest. You might be the best business in your space. Fast forward 10 years, if you guys took a bunch of time off and all you're doing is playing golf, I promise you have a target on you and someone's coming after you.
Yeah. So you guys start building it. And, I think this is another kind of takeaway that I've had from doing a lot of these at this point is the idea of linear success, the idea of up and to the right and the kind of all lights are green is just an erroneous, it's just erroneous, but you do it and I do it. You look at somebody else and say, oh, it's easy for that guy or that girl. And talk to me about like the hard, talk to me about the hard in that journey.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few things that kind of stand out in my mind. So my business was not a sexy business. We knew we had more demand than we had supply. And I knew that because we had all this data. At a certain point, my business pivoted from just like hey, how do we sell furniture on the internet to hey, how do we gather the most data possible? We essentially turned into like a search engine optimization machine. Wow. How do we get our products seen very first in every search result across every marketplace that we sell on? And so data informed us kind of on all these different decisions that we were, trying to make every single day. We were not a sexy business though. And in fact, we knew that on a year, and I remember this because we did this analysis, was like on a year where we did 11 million in revenue, we missed 7 million in potential sales due to being out of stock. So you can't sell on the internet. Like your product has to come off site the moment you're out of stock because speed to ship is extremely critical in being an e-com guy.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, dude, we could have been an $18 million business.
Almost
this year.
half your,
yes.
Almost double your company just if we had the inventory.
If we had the cash to stay in inventory businesses, you guys have invested in a bunch of them. Like they're very cash. Like you have to forecast correctly because those are dollar bills sitting on your warehouse racks, right? And so we pitched everyone in Utah. And again, this is like 2011, probably something like that. We pitched everybody in Utah. Everyone said no. And in fact, I had a decidedly negative experience with who I thought was the marquee investor in the state. I'm like, I know this guy has a big vision. I know he's going to see it. Then he comes in, I verbatim, he was like, you guys will never be able to scale and you will never be able to get to where you say you're going to go. Like, this is what he told Matt and I. I literally almost cried when he went out the door. I'm like, this is the premier investor in the entire state of Utah telling us.
Just told us our business sucks.
He told us our business sucks, And anyway, 4 years later, he came back and apologized and said, where can I send a check? And I'm like, that ship has sailed, brother.
Well, honestly, there's lessons to that.
Yeah.
That I think young founders need to hear, which is like, you got to trust your vision.
Yeah.
And definitely take feedback. But ultimately, if it's going to work, it's because you make it work and you literally never stop trying until it works.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people along the way that won't believe in you.
There's tenacity that has to exist that this gentleman who had made a lot of money investing into other businesses.
He's really smart guy.
Couldn't have been a smarter person. What I realized though is he knew nothing about our space.
Yeah.
He knew nothing about e-commerce. He didn't know a lot about product even, you know? And so in fact, I knew a lot more than he did about what we were trying to accomplish.
Which is usually the case.
Yes.
The founder most of the time is, I mean, it's all day, every day. It's what you go to sleep thinking about. It's waking up. And again, asymmetry of knowledge. Sometimes that doesn't work in your favor when you're going and raising money. Somebody has an old like paradigm of kind of how business works, and the fundamental landscape of business is changing. You know, at that point, it didn't work. Down the road, it did. But at that point, it didn't.
So around that same time, we actually embarked on a retail concept. You know, and again, we were like $10-12 million in revenue. What I was thinking at the time was our cash cycle, because we were always short on cash, right? Like cash was always, I'm like, oh, dude, how do we make payroll? How do I order more product? Like cash was always this huge stress.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what if we opened our own retail stores? Because then your cash conversion cycle, the moment they buy something, they give you your credit card, you get the cash.
Of course.
What I didn't realize is the overhead and everything else that comes with running a retail chain is entirely different from running a pure play e-commerce
You were
business.
starting a whole different business model.
I didn't think I was, though, at the time. We spent an entire summer. We propped up all these retail stores. I was selling patio furniture direct to the public. I invested a whole bunch of money in marketing. Complete flop. No one knew who we were. Nobody recognized the logo. Nobody so in a year where I was super cash constrained, we lost $1.5 million in a summer. That I think was the closest that I had come. There was one other time to going bankrupt as a company.
It was precarious.
It was, how do I make my mortgage payment this month? It was, honey, let's turn off the cable. Let's, can we go down to one cell phone? like how,
that's heavy stuff though.
When you can't make your mortgage as the founder because you prioritize making sure everyone else is paid in your company.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, look, I have to have employees to make this thing work. Right. And
especially when it's your stupid fault.
Yes.
Like,
my decision.
I did this strategy.
That
obviously the wrong strategy.
Yeah.
And now I can't pay my mortgage. It's like this, it's a lonely place.
It is weighty and it is lonely, and very few people understand what you're going through, and now they look at this outcome and they're like, oh man, that must have just, you just started it up and you sold for $1 billion. Like, congratulations, man. And it's like, I can't tell you how many sleepless nights I cried. I prayed. You rely on every potential power you possibly can summon to lift you out of this crisis.
Talk about that, like praying and crying.
I'll give you. So that was the first time that we almost went bankrupt. I think it was 2015. I had a pretty robust business by that point, right? Like, I think we're doing, I don't know, 40 million in revenue. Wow. We're making like 6 million in EBITDA, 7. It was like a legit business. Real business at that point. There was a port strike on the West Coast of the United States. So all the dock workers got together. The union decided to strike. This is during the Obama administration. All of our containers of product, primarily we sourced from Southeast Asia. They were coming in through the West Coast. If you don't have product, you're not allowed to sell. So all of our inventory was sitting, floating in boats out in Long Beach and Oakland and those harbors. Every single day, our inventory dwindled and dwindled and dwindled. And you're months into this port strike and nothing is happening. So I've got, I think, 40 or 50 people in my corporate office, something like that. I pulled together my management team. There's probably 8 of us. Half of them were religious, believing people. Half of them were not. I said, guys, here's the list of employees that we have in the business. Who do we furlough first? And me, I liked my business most when we were sub 50 employees because I knew your wife, I knew your kids, I knew your dog's name. It was very kind of a familiar atmosphere.
Which matters a lot to you. Like, relationships are everything to you.
I love people, generally speaking, and I loved these people. We were in the trenches together. And I pulled them together and I said, guys, and I'm looking at this list of people, and all I'm envisioning is their wife and their kids when they don't get a paycheck, right? And they're like, oh crap, like I don't have a job. And I'm like, oh, I hope you have a job in the future. It was really hard to like kind of balance this. And I said, can we just get together as a management team? And it's not just an LDS thing. It's like literally invoking the power of God. I said, I believe that if you fast and pray and ask God for miracles, that I've seen it happen. Like I have experienced miracles in my life. They said, awesome. We will participate with you. We believe in this. Again, not same members of my faith, but wonderful humans. So we all decided to fast. I'd never done this before. Like, it's not like I really invoked religion in kind of what we were doing. We fasted. We all knelt down as a management team and prayed. We said, we are almost out of business. We've almost run completely out of inventory, and there's no end in sight. And this is no joke. The next day, Barack Obama announced the resolution to the port strike.
Wow.
The next day, I'm not saying we're responsible for it. It was probably just very fortuitous timing, but I do think it taught me sometimes you can't. You have to rely on a higher power sometimes. Like it was very poignant for us as an organization. Like, hey, we can do everything in our power, and sometimes you just need a little bit of help.
I remember a couple of times like knocking doors and like challenging times. We're dealing with headwinds and that's just a tough job in general. Like, everybody likes to be told you're awesome.
Yeah.
And when you just get told you suck, which is kind of like, that's knocking doors. You'd get told no 10 times for every one yes. And there was a couple times where I remember just like literally crying in my car, like broken.
Yeah.
And quitting's not an option. I got my wife at, we're committed to kind of live. This is our career. And so at least at that point, quitting wasn't an option. And kind of once the emotion dies down, like you kind of have to like put on your big boy pants and go to work. And
you just get up and do it again.
Yeah.
Like that's, it's the tenacity of an entrepreneur. Like it's when all things are stacked against you, you continue.
But those low points are like magic. And I love like is when you share that you've had those sleepless nights and you've had like, I need to ask God for help, because I can't do this by myself. And like I think that's the raw and real stuff that people don't talk over in like the book or the commencement speech. It's kind of like it's all, but it's not that linear, and it's not that like, it's more raw and more rough and bumpy than way more than people would think it.
I wound up winning the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year award here for Utah.
Yeah.
Right. And all I could think about, because this is when my big business was large and I had, hundreds of employees in the corporate office and I had all these people doing all this work. That award should have been given to me when I was in the middle of the fire.
Yeah.
Like that was the moment when I should have been the CEO of the year. Not when I had all these other people doing all this stuff.
Yes, that momentum.
Yes. Yeah. So I admire those CEOs. And if you've got CEOs listening to us right now, or founders that are in the trenches, that are taking those bullets, those guys are the CEOs of the year, and we're not seeing them right now because their business hasn't been crowned, the next unicorn. So
I was talking to Alex Dunn about Ben Horowitz and this book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Yeah.
And he's like, I cried when I read that book. It was the first time where I was like, someone understands me. Like someone, and he talks about the struggle, and he's like, the struggle is when you should get fired.
Yeah.
But no one will fire you.
Yeah.
Because they don't want the job.
Yes. Like your job is so brutal that no one wants to take it.
Like the struggle is like when people like say you're incompetent and you believe them, it's like,
I think I am.
We both see this the same way, but I got to keep going. Yep. And so, but I think another like key lesson from this is that if you keep going, like all storms don't last forever. Yeah. And like, there's always light after darkness, and the morning comes after the night. And if you keep after it, you will succeed, and
for us, it felt like we were going out of business every day for the first decade. Like I just felt like one small bump in the road, and that's ultimately how I lived. It was like okay, like today's a new day. What did we learn from yesterday?
Yeah.
And how do we apply that to
How
tomorrow?
do we move forward?
How do we move forward? Like
Yeah.
no one's going to do this for you, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's part of the problem. I get reached out to a lot on social media and they're like, hey, tell me what business to start. And can you hold my hand and mentor me through this process? Largely, you can't. Now, I can share with you kind of some life experiences, but you're starting your own business with your own vision. Now, I can, connect you to some people. I can do that kind of stuff. But unless you are willing to put on those pants every day, absolutely kill yourself over it. Like no one's going to be able to do that for you. I can't force you to become successful.
Yeah. So you go through it, had amazing outcomes along the way, had private equity group came in along the way. It was kind of life-changing event. And then ultimately ended up selling at, looking in hindsight, the peak of the market. Like, you can never know that kind of, it's easy to understand history looking backwards. Talk to me about like that road. Like did you always know you were going to sell?
Yes, we always had a plan to sell. Okay. Like that was kind of the plan. What was really interesting is COVID. We didn't know this at the time, right? Like nobody could have predicted COVID. Did you think we were going to have a pandemic in our lifetime where we were, forced to vaccinate by the government and, forced to wear masks and stuff like that?
It's a black swan, it's.
Yeah. And I don't think we'll ever allow that kind of stuff to happen again. Right. But on a year where we had projected to do 325 million in revenue, I did 500 million in revenue. Like the demand from COVID, from everyone going home to their houses, looking around, they're like, oh, wait, I need a patio set. I need a side table. I need a desk.
You're spending time at home. It's like, I want to enjoy it. The
entire world went home. Like we were huge beneficiaries. If you look at Wayfair and Overstock's earnings, they were never higher than during COVID. In fact, when we sold, Wayfair's stock price was like $350 a share, right? They were worth $30 billion. Their stock price today is 60.
That different.
Putting that in fact, it had dropped to 30, after COVID kind of receded and everybody went back to work because sales kind of fell dramatically. So the market was frothy, interest rates were low. We got the highest exit multiple in the history of home furnishings. So I do not know of another business that got the kind of multiple that we got on our business. And I think there were a variety of things that went into that. One, we were at scale. Two, we were extremely profitable. Three, we had data that no one else had. Like we were a data-driven business. And so we were really differentiated.
Yeah.
But man, all those market forces combined and it was an awesome outcome.
So you go do the sale. What changes? Because I think you go from living in scarcity.
Yeah.
We got to turn off one cell phone to like, I could not show up tomorrow or ever again and my kids would be fine. Like, what happens in your mentality and kind of like, how do you re-up for Brad 3.0? You know what I mean?
There's a bit of like, what do they call it? Survivor's guilt or where it's like, why have I been so lucky to have this happen to me? You almost feel guilty a little bit. But really what it did was reposition my life to say, okay, it's not about the mortgage payment now. It's about how much of an impact I can have on the world. Like I retired when I was 40, right? Like most people don't get to retire until they're 65 and most people don't wind up with the resources that Megan and I have wound up with. And so immediately Megan and I established our family foundation and we were like, how can we help the community that has given us so much? That was the goal. It was like, how do I position myself to be the best version of myself? Hence enrolling at Harvard Business School, hence starting the family foundation. How do I have an outsized impact with this?
I look at the things that you've done since, and arguably they're way more impactful than the things that you did to build the business. Like I look at like the IHC contribution, and this is another topic, but like you're, being on the board of IHC and kind of the amount of money you've given and not just you personally, but like you were a part of, some big raises that I was able to participate in and different things, but then also like, improving yourself. I think that this is something that is like core to my philosophy. This principle of Kaizen, this principle of continuous improvement. And that was always something that I admired so much about you before I knew you well, was that you'd still have that drive. I think a lot of people look at you going back to Harvard and they'd be like, why? Like, you teach there. You know what I mean? But like you went back, and talk a little bit about that experience, and even the contrast between I'm a student at the U going to classes and it's fingernails on a chalkboard versus being an executive at Harvard Business School doing it. Talk to me about kind of one, changes that happened with you, and then two, the experience.
So can I talk, you brought up IHC. Can I promote my fetal center really quick?
I love it. Yeah, let's go back.
Okay. So Grant, my second son who passed away, he just had his 14th birthday on May 14th. So it was a beautiful day. We got together as a family. We discovered that he had some health problems when he was in the womb, and I'm running Walker Edison. It's busy. My wife gets this terrible news while she's alone at the doctor's office and is just bawling her eyes out. And he's born. He's beautiful. We love him. But his lungs and his kidneys don't work. And so he passes away in our arms a couple days later. I don't know that there's anything more painful than having to lose your kid. And it happens every day all across the world. And it's a club you never want to be in. You never want to be in that club. And sometimes you just stop and you're like, holy cow, man, this is so much pain. Like, why is this happening? The why becomes clear, at least in my experience, with the passage of time. You have to go through that grief process. You have to, put your faith in God's hands, kind of a thing. Fast forward a few years as we're preparing to exit Walker Edison, and we learned that there's been medical advancements that would have allowed Grant to have been cured in the womb. Didn't exist at the time when he was born, right? Those medical advancements don't exist here in Utah. They don't exist at primaries. And so we start talking to primary children's. We're like, hey, our son died from this. We know that it can be cured now, but it's only cured at MD Anderson or Johns Hopkins or whatever. Why can't we have that here? And so we link up with Dr. Stephen Fenton, Dr. Monson, and Dr. Byrne, and then these amazing administrators. And when we exited, we knew the very first thing we wanted to do was offer those life-saving services to families, to kids in the womb. And so now we have 600 patients. And when I say patients, I'm talking babies in the womb. I am extraordinarily pro-life. And I'm not just like militant. I'm saying, can we save lives? Can we save lives in the womb? Can we get these kids healthy, sew them back up, let them cook for a little while in mom's belly, and get them born happy and healthy so they can be productive? And so that's what we do every single day with our amazing staff at the Grant Scott Bonham Fetal Center.
I think about this idea of money being a magnifier.
Yeah.
And money being, a magnifier of who you are. And I honor you for that.
Thanks.
Honestly, it fires me up.
Our son's picture and his story live on the wall at the Grant Scott Bonham Fetal Center. We named it after him. And so every single day we have families that go in that see his picture that become hopeful for their situation. And I don't want to get too emotional about this, but we will have people come up to us in the line at the grocery store crying. And they're like, your fetal center saved our child. And that's in my son's name. You talk about turning pain into beauty. And that's just one of those opportunities. And there's a lot of people that get to do it. And we're fortunate to be one of those families.
It's special. You think about again, it's kind of this, why did this have to happen?
Yeah.
I'm enthralled with this idea that your worst day can be your best day.
Yeah.
And that, if you'll look for the good, and you'll find a way to find the meaning in the pain.
Yeah.
That you can ultimately, and you've done that, I just look at, different people that have that same experience that you guys had with Grant, and there's choices.
Yeah.
And one of them is you can be bitter, or you can be depressed, or you can be,
and I can't judge anyone for how they respond, because I'd never felt depression until I lost my son.
Yeah.
And now I have empathy for those that have depression. you can let it take you down,
Yeah.
or you can, over time, and I'm not saying this has to be a quick thing, or you can allow it to inspire you.
I think even like, Christ, and I think about this process of like having to atone and having to feel the pain, and that this was like a requisite step.
Yeah.
And there's just some things, the pain had to be bad enough for you and Megan
to affect change.
To affect change.
Yeah.
And you think about the thousands and tens of thousands and over time, millions of people, that their lives will be better because you felt that pain. It's beautiful. Like it truly is like what life's all about. So I'm glad you went back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I see this one equally as impactful. This idea of like continuous improvement and becoming the type of like you have to qualify yourself with the skills necessary to meet the challenges that are bigger than what you faced before.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow like you just decided, even though like I've done this, I'm going to go double down on myself. Talk to me about why you made the decision and then what your experience was.
I think, so I don't think you can fix the world until you fix yourself. It's like, yeah, I want to cure cancer. Well, have you ever studied what causes cancer? Have you ever gone through, like what knowledge do you have that would allow you to cure cancer? So for me, there was a few important things in enrolling at Harvard Business School. One, I never finished my degree, right? Like at the University of Utah, nails on a chalkboard. It was really hard for me to go to class every day. I dreaded it. I wanted an experience, and I did a lot of research. I looked at Stanford. I looked at a bunch of other executive kind of programs. I wanted an experience that was focused on business. And as I read through, kind of the materials that Harvard Business School had sent to me, I'm like, wow, this is it. This is it. And so that was important to me, to go back to school and continue to learn, but learn specifically the things that I was really passionate about. But two, I expect my kids to always continue learning. And they saw, as I worked really hard and I wasn't home, as much as I am now, obviously, but there's never a point that I want to stop learning in this life, and so Harvard Business School to me was that. It got me way outside my comfort zone. You've been in these classes at Harvard. I know you're a big, you go back a lot every single year to a bunch of different programs. It's really inspiring, by the way. But I believe that I'm a substantially better business person today because of it. And I almost wish that I had done it sooner.
Yeah. What's your takeaway from it?
I have not thought big enough.
Yeah.
There's a couple things that happened to me at Harvard. We managed to grow a business. If you had asked me in the early stages of Walker Edison, how big could this be?
Yeah.
I would have said, I don't know, 10 million, 12 million, 15 on the high side. We wound up doing billions in revenue, like billions across, those years. In hindsight, I look at it and I say, man, okay, so I did $3.5 billion in revenue. I think if I had done it better, I could have done 10 or 15 billion in revenue. And so Harvard just really expands the scope of what you believe is possible if you execute properly.
It's because you're around people doing it.
Yes.
That proximity of like people that are actually doing it.
Yeah.
I think, if you were to say, hey, what are a couple of takeaways that I've had going there, is you just realize that Salt Lake and Provo is a very tiny microcosm of the world. And the world is a big place.
Yes.
And that helped me see it from a global view and just see that, hey, like I love where I live and I'm always, Utah's always home.
Yes.
But a lot of people have a home all over the world and different perspectives. And one of them is the perspective of just thinking globally versus thinking on a regional or local level.
Yes. We think too small.
Yeah.
Like legitimately we think too small. And I think people rise to the level of expectation that you put them on, right?
Yep.
And or that you put on them. And I think even with ourselves, it's like, Casey, if you made every right choice from here to the end of your life, you would probably be the world's richest man. You would probably be the president of the United States. You would probably be all these, you know what I mean? It's like, where are our expectations set into what can we get done in this life that we have? And this life is very short. Like I'm 44 and I'm like, my daughter just started driving. I'm like, what on earth is happening?
And I think like even to take that a step further, all of us have friends that pass every year.
Yeah.
And it's more short for, some of us.
Yeah.
And so I think there is some urgency to say, man, if I got music to play, I better start playing. Like if I have work that needs to be done. And honestly, it's another one of the things that I really admire about you is you're not putting those things off for another day. Like you're taking massive action, and we could literally go to 10 different places, and some of them before we finish up, I want to talk about. Two things before we finish up, and we've got to do 2.0 on this because there's more that I want to cover. Talk to me about faith in the whole journey. Because I know it's important to you. I know it's important to Megan. Like, how does faith fit in the mix? And like both in the past and then also as you look forward 10, 20, 30, 50 years down the road?
I think faith can be looked at a number of different ways. Obviously, I think having faith in yourself, you talk about being alone in those dark moments as an entrepreneur. People are like, wow, you're an idiot. And you're like, man, maybe I am an idiot, and like sometimes you get down on yourself. Having confidence that you are able to do what you've set out to do is like a driving force with entrepreneur. Like you can tell me today, Casey, like, hey, this new business venture that you're launching, Brad, I don't think it's going to be successful. And I will literally fight you to the ends of the earth to make it successful.
You believe.
Like I believe wholeheartedly now I'm not naive to say, or I'm not arrogant enough to say, like, hey, I can accomplish everything because I can't. Like there's people with other skill sets that I need to bring on board to do stuff that I can't do. But I have a high degree of confidence. I have faith in myself. I have faith in my family. I have faith in my community that we are going to be able to get this, to where we want to take it. Having faith in God is extremely important. I believe personally in my own life, despite my miscalculations and those choices that probably weren't the right choices or the best choices, that God has had a hand kind of guiding where I have gone. And so I have this weird thought about spirituality generally, and people in our faith sometimes kind of blame God for things that, like, well, I felt like I needed to do this and it didn't work out, right? Sometimes you just make a bad choice, and I don't think we can blame God for it. Like we have our free agency. God gave you a really great mind. Choose the best thing. Don't just like use these moments of where you feel like you're being influenced. Like I watch people make horrible decisions. They're like, wow, I felt like God told me. I'm like, I could have told you that was a terrible choice. Like you don't need to pass your choice off onto someone else. Like you're rationalizing your decisions. Make the right choice. Weigh the pros, weigh the cons. There's probably a good, better, best somewhere along the way. And try to choose the best every single time. And by the way, if it doesn't work out, there was that Jeffrey R. Holland talk where he was like, hey, which way should I go? He goes down the right side, the right road, and it's a dead end. He's like, oh, cool. Well, I just figured out that's a dead end. So now let's go back to the other road.
I mean, that principle is so profound. It's just, you really can't move a parked car.
Yeah.
You can't steer a parked car, and you just got to get moving. Yeah. And even if you're going the wrong way, you can adjust, but you're moving. Like that paralysis by analysis will kill you,
Jeff Bonham said, I've tried to kind of distill this down into like a bumper sticker, right? Like, what do I believe? And Jeff Bonham said it to me, last year in one of his entrepreneurship classes. He said, we look to invest into founders with a bias towards action.
Yeah, they move.
Yeah. So many people don't move. They're like, what do I do next? What do I do? I'm like, pick something, pick anything and start today. I get asked a lot, like, when's the best time to start a business? And I said, today. Like today is the best time to start a business. What are you waiting for? Like markets are never going to be perfect for you. Like go get started and do it right now.
No, it's so cool. I'm going to finish with this. Talk to me about the decision to go into politics. this is always so fascinating to me. Like, it doesn't call to me at all. Like, not even a little bit, it actually, like, I'm like, who would choose to go into that? But the more time that I spend with people that I respect that are in it, I have a lot of admiration for people that don't need money, don't need a paycheck, and would choose to go give their life to service. You know what I mean? To go like in an environment that's, like,
it's tough,
thankless, if you will. You're kind of putting yourself into the arena, and with that comes the arrows and talk to me about like what inspired you to go into politics and ultimately like what you want to accomplish by doing it.
Let me kind of frame this a little bit. So I mentioned, my deep desire to have the biggest impact I can possibly have on the world around me with my remaining years on Earth, right? Like, how do I drive outsized impact?
Yeah.
The state of Utah this year has a $29.4 billion budget. The LDS Church, which is, I believe, the largest, like private employer, at least based in Utah around the entire world, has a $6 billion budget. You look at people like Ryan Smith, Todd Peterson, like they had multi-billion-dollar budgets, right? We have tens of thousands of people working for the state and a $29.4 billion budget this year. If you want to talk about moving the needle, get involved in politics.
Yeah.
You will never move a needle as much as you can by having influence in politics. And so if you care deeply about policy around economic development, which is, entrepreneurs,
matters,
which I'm leaning that, the new startup initiative,
which is so rad.
Oh, I love it. Startup.utah.gov, by the way, if anybody's listening, like that wants to go start a business, it's a new resource portal. But this is what I'm talking about. Like Governor Cox asked me to step in and help promote entrepreneurship. We want to be the number one place for startups in the world.
Yeah.
Like we don't have our sights set on like, hey, let's be the best place in the States. It's like, let's be the number one startup capital of the entire world. How can we enable that environment as a government? And so I just look at it and I say, okay, I can sit on the sidelines. I can complain. By the way, Casey, if you're not involved in politics, just wait until a law passes that limits private equity or limits,
for sure.
Loopholes in tax code or whatever. And pretty soon, most people at some point in their life will be impacted by laws that are passed by legislators that probably mean well, but have unintended
and sometimes don't mean well.
And
you
sometimes,
know what I mean? And I think that's part of it is just you realize like we need good leaders.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so part of it is you see this as the biggest opportunity to make the most amount of change.
If I'm looking for outsized impact, being involved in politics, making sure good people get elected, by the way, I think most people are inherently good that want to get involved. There's a few really bad seeds that manage to get elected over time that, for whatever reason, whether it's their name in lights or whether it's power or whether it's greed or whatever, that's why they wanted to get in politics. And so I try really hard to make sure people that align with my values, with my family's values, and honestly, what makes Utah great, that's who I want in a position of power.
Got it.
Yeah.
You had an experience that prompted you to get into politics. You were talking to me about a dinner and there was it Donald Rumsfeld?
Donald Rumsfeld.
Yeah. Talk to me about that. Cause I think that's like a coincidence in life that all of a sudden ends up becoming kind of a crossroads.
Casey, we should host a podcast and just compare moments in life.
No, it's
like little tiny moments in life that have had this ripple effect. You throw a small rock in a pond and just like wave after wave.
We've talked about a bunch of them on this, but I can't stop thinking about that. Like this dinner that all of a sudden like puts almost like Inception, puts like this little like idea in your mind that's turned into ultimately like you kind of being in a position to go take an outsized role, which fires me up. I always tell you like, the second you decide to do anything, I'm vote number one just because I love what you're about.
Thanks. So I went fly fishing in Montana, with Jake Howdy, Jake, and his next door neighbor happened to be Donald Rumsfeld in Montana. And Rummy had retired and, he was kind of living out his last days kind of a thing. And Jake invites him over. He's like, hey, we're having a barbecue. Why don't you come over? We sat and talked with Donald Rumsfeld, former Secretary of Defense, inner circle cabinet for George Bush. He was a congressman. At 30, he was in the room when Richard Nixon. It was him, Richard Nixon, and Spiro Agnew when Richard Nixon chose his running mate. Like this is the insider of insiders.
There, yeah.
And we talked to this guy for 3 hours over, and I had always kind of taken in. I read a lot, right? Like I'm a voracious reader. I read a lot of books. I ingest a lot of news and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I was like interested in politics, but politics is kind of vague and opaque for most people. Like, have you ever thought about running for politics? Like, what does that look like? What does that entail? So we're halfway through this dinner. Rumsfeld stops and he looks at me and he says, Brad, you're the kind of person that should run for politics. And I'm like, like I've literally never once in my life thought about running for anything ever. It was that seed, the moment of inception where he planted this thought in my mind, like, maybe I could run for politics. Maybe I could be involved at kind of a higher level and kind of try to shape policy across Utah. And so that was Rumsfeld.
Well, brother, I think you're a force for good.
Thanks.
In the world. I think you're a force for God. Like I try to like collect or have a short list of kind of people that inspire me, and I try to spend time with them. And you fall in that group of people that, try to say, hey, let's make sure I schedule some Brad for golf this quarter because you always light me up. And I love what you're doing. I love the impact that you're making. And the thing that I'd say is I do think your best days are in the future and not in the past.
Thanks.
I think that you've teed yourself up to go make your biggest impact. And I can't wait to, follow your story and your journey and just know I'm cheering about you. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.